So with me today, I have the CEO of Freja eID Group, Johan Henrikson, to give an introduction of the company and where it's headed. Welcome, Johan.
Thank you very much, Jonathan.
First of all, for those not familiar with Freja, what is it that you do?
Well, I suppose there's a million different ways of explaining it, but let me try an elevator pitch for just simplicity. As the world becomes more digital, basically becomes ubiquitous. It's everywhere all the time, which means in effect that it affects every vertical, every industry, every company in some way, shape, or form. And that's, of course, being accelerated by artificial intelligence, by machine learning, and a whole bunch of different technologies. Now, all of these developments have become more or less necessary to live in the society that we've created. But in order for this to work, we need trust. We need to be able to protect our personal integrity. Now, one of the cornerstones of that trust is knowing who you're dealing with, the identity of the other party. And basically, that's what Freja is. It's a smart identity as a service, as a cloud service that you can buy as a company. And we've quickly grown since the beginning of 2018 to be the second largest eID in an extremely high competitive market that is the Swedish market. We are notified in the EU as an approved Swedish e-identity. We're the only one. And we can bring in identities from over 19 countries today, and that number is growing all the time. So that's really what Freja is.
And you were touching on this, the competition in Sweden, because here in Sweden, at least, we have what's called Bank ID, which more or less everyone is using. What is Freja compared to Bank ID in this context? I mean, what is your unique selling point?
Well, there's a lot of different unique selling points, really depending on where you're coming from. I mean, when you have one single monopoly solution, that's a little bit like the Soviet Union or North Korea. You don't really have a lot of choice. Now, when we came into the market, we realized that e-identities is so much more than just answering yes or no to a simple login question. So Freja you can use for physical identity, you can use it for work-related identity. Some companies use it as a backup identity because they want at least two different nationally approved identities to work. So there's a whole bunch of different reasons, really. But among all, we really are the challenger when it comes to bringing new functionality into the market and being innovative.
And in terms of competition abroad, I know that Norway have something similar to Bank ID, but elsewhere, how is the situation like?
I would say Norway is a good example of how it looks in the Nordic region or in the Scandinavian region, if you will, because here we have a fairly mature market in terms of e-identities that are distributed among people living in the country and used for multiple purposes, not only for government, but also for private services. If you go beyond the Nordics, Northern Europe, Holland, for instance, are also fairly mature, but quickly as you move south, going into Germany or down into Italy or Spain, you don't have that maturity at all. You have solutions to different types of problems, but it's not an e-identity that's used across the board in the same way. So just a couple of years ago, I saw the statistics for the German e-identity scheme, and we're talking about a few million transactions per year, whereas the Swedish national schemes is more than a few billion transactions a year. So I mean, considering the size difference of the countries, you realize how different we are using the solutions.
But is that really your big opportunity here to enter into markets that are less mature than?
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's one of the reasons why we've decided to support the eIDAS framework. We've decided to become approved there. Now, that framework is changing over time, but as we see it, we are positioning ourselves for a European expansion to begin with, but there's really no end to where you could expand with an e-identity. So we will begin in Europe at least.
If we look at your business model, then how do you generate revenues? And you essentially have two business areas as we speak. If you can touch upon those two areas.
Well, we've divided it up for simplicity when we're explaining it, basically in a private eID, which is basically when me as a private person identify myself to a service. This could be a government service or a private service for that sake. The other option is me as an employee identifying myself. So the customer there would be any company who wants to identify their employees, for instance. So it's really the same piece of technology in the background, to be fair, but we're dividing it up because the customer looks a little bit different, and also the willingness to pay is a little bit different. So we've divided up, but both models really, or both areas, we have a subscription-based revenue model. So most of our customers will contract us and contract the Freja service for 1, 2, 3 years, and pay a monthly fee for using Freja in an unlimited fashion.
But the end users never really paying. It's the platform or the service that provides the transaction or identification that actually pay you in order to use the platform that you provide.
Yeah, you could say the tax authority, for instance, in Sweden that uses Freja, they are paying for the logins or the signatures, and it makes some kind of sense because it's these services that have the greatest value from actually identifying the users. So that's why we call them relying parties, because they are relying on the fact that we have done our work in terms of assuring the identity of the individual.
I had a question on how you plan to expand, because as we mentioned before, there is geographical expansion and maybe also expansion in terms of the services that you can provide. How do you look upon expansion going forward?
Well, a couple of years ago, we had really prepared or started doing the groundwork for an international expansion, especially in the UK. Now, as the pandemic came along and the war in Ukraine, we really decided to pause that for the time being. And things were actually not moving that fast in the UK either at that point in time. So to be fair, it was a good time to pause it. But it also gave us the opportunity to start developing much stronger partnerships with interesting partners that can provide the strength and long-term commitment into the market. Because if you look at it, an e-identity, even the bank's e-identity that you mentioned as a competitor, I mean, they've been around since the late 1990s. It's not a new solution. It takes time to create the marketplace. And if you want to do the same in a completely virgin market like the UK, for instance, you will need a strong presence over a long period of time. So we're looking for companies with large user base, for instance, with strong connections, maybe strong connections in government as well, because probably we need changes in legislation and things like that. We need somebody with a long-term commitment, a strong interest, maybe a strong selfish interest, i.e. maybe they have an interest in identifying the users themselves. And I'll give a couple of examples of these types of companies so it doesn't sound just theoretical. But one such example would be a large bank, for instance, in any of these countries, because they have a digital communication with their customer already today. They have a strong self-interest to use a digital identity. They probably have a strong relationship with the government and with financial institutions. So they would be a typical example. Large telco would be another type of example. So we're really exploring different routes to the market, and I think we are well on the way of identifying and building those relationships.
And in terms of services offered, I had a question from the community asking about wallet functions, which, well, he took up the example of hunting licenses, for example, which is one example of a wallet function. But are you looking into wallet functions at all, or to expand on that side?
Yes, we started really with a wallet function a couple of years ago, and the idea then was really to start storing evidence or certificates together with your ID. And one of the first examples that we created was really the COVID passport, the proof that you had taken the COVID shots. Now that's not extremely relevant today, of course, but the idea behind it is still very strong, because you're storing evidence that you've done something and you're storing it together with your identity. Now, in the same way that we stored that proof, we can also store, for instance, a hunting permit or a driver's license or anything else. Now, the big problem or the big challenge, I should say, in Europe right now is that except for in the area of driver's licenses, there are very few standards related to how these pieces of evidence should be displayed in a digital format. So we are working together with large Swedish government institutions to start exploring how we can present this in a way that is consumable to other parties as well. So I think the technology is there. We are working together with a few of these large government agencies today. And I think that within a 12-month period, we should at least have one or two extra pieces of evidence or certificates or whatever they may be. I don't think it will necessarily be the driver's license, because there's a lot of political interest in specifically the driver's license. And I really don't know why that is, but things like the hunting permit or water scooter certificate or something like that are prime candidates that could easily be stored in Freja today. Now, having said that, we know that the EU is looking at specific standards around the wallet. And of course, these standards haven't been set yet. So we won't be supporting that standard until we actually know what the standard is. So that will probably take a few iterations and a couple of years in the future. But we are very much committed in going in that direction.
Looking at Freja as an investment, then, what would you say are the important milestones here going forward for the company as such?
Well, I think one of the most important milestones or KPIs to monitor is the annual recurring revenue, and we publish that every quarter, and basically that's showing how quickly we are adding subscriptions to the service as it looks today. And that, of course, is bringing us closer and closer to profitability, which is the milestone really that we're headed for as soon as possible. A lot of the initial work that we did 2018-19 was about growth and establishing the platform and getting the first number of users into the platform. Today we're almost 1 million users, so we really have the users in there, or at least a good base. We have a few thousand digital services today, so I think we have a good foundation to build on. Now we need to show the market that you can make money off this. And that's really, I think, one of the most important things to monitor if you're an investor.
Finally, if you were to give 3 reasons to invest in Freja, what would they be?
Well, one reason is that you believe that identity is the key to trust, and that if you believe that digitalization will remain and it will be an important part of our lives, and we will need to identify ourselves in this environment, then Freja is one of the few actually companies you can invest in specifically around identity. If you also believe that identity, with a strong identity, you can add almost any service like payments and banking and so on. It basically means that we can add revenue streams to our platform for the foreseeable future. So that's also a strong reason. And the fact that we have a strong commercial model and that it can be expanded in multiple countries or region means that we've really only started to scratch the surface of what Freja can become.
Johan, thank you very much for taking the time, and good luck with your growth journey here going forward.
Thank you so much.